Philadelphia thought it was going to be another chapter in a dominant run. The Eagles rolled into Sunday with a 20 of 21 win streak behind them, unbeaten, confident, the kind of team that makes fans expect a statement every week. Instead, Lincoln Financial Field watched that certainty evaporate in 7 breathless, chaotic minutes late in the fourth quarter, and by the time the clock hit 0, the scoreboard read Broncos 21, Eagles 17. This game didn't die quietly. Denver's comeback was the kind of sequence you script in a movie, measured, relentless, and ultimately capped by a decision that left the stadium stunned. With 7:36 left and the Broncos trailing by 1 after their second fourth-quarter score, Sean Payton called for a 2-point conversion. Bo Nix rolled right, found Troy Franklin, his former Oregon teammate, and suddenly Denver had the lead. It wasn't flashy for the sake of it. It was a calculated gamble that forced Philadelphia to score a touchdown on the final drive instead of settling for a field goal. It worked. Earlier, the Eagles had felt in control. Jalen Hurts hit a 52-yard strike to Devonta Smith in the first half that set up a quick touchdown, then connected with Saquon Barkley on a 47-yard scoring play that looked like the prototype of what this offense can do when all the gears mesh. That sequence pushed Philadelphia comfortably ahead and looked for a time like the blueprint for a routine win. But football lives in the details, and the details broke the Eagles' way over the final 15 minutes. Denver slowly built a rhythm in the second half. A 10-play, 62-yard drive culminated in a 2-yard J.K. Dobbins run, and the Broncos began to reassert themselves. The defense, which had been undermined at times in the first half, started making plays. A simulated pressure buy from coordinator Vance Joseph resulted in a third-down sack from Jaquan McMillian that helped swing momentum. Then penalties, the kind that turned promising drives into painful memory, crept into Philadelphia's script. An illegal shift on Barkley wiped out what would have been a critical 30-yard 4th-and-4 conversion to Smith. That one flag felt huge in the moment because it erased a sequence that could have flipped field position and clock management in the Eagles' favor. Later, a questionable call, initially intentional grounding on Nix, then picked up, and a late hit penalty on Zach Bond that erased what looked like a potential 4th-and-2 stop, all chipped away at the margin for error. And there was the odd, almost cinematic moment late in the third quarter when Broncos safety Talanoa Hufanga got his hand on a Hurts pass and dropped what might have turned into a back-breaking pick six. In a game this tight, that single misplay was as consequential as any defensive stop or offensive play. The final minutes were a clinic in clock management by Denver and a test of composure for Philadelphia. After the 2-point conversion, the Broncos chewed clock and pushed the ball downfield. They converted a 3rd and 15 with a 34-yard strike to Cortland Sutton, then followed that with an 11-yard touchdown to Evan Engram. The pressure shifted to the Eagles, who needed a touchdown to win. Philadelphia didn't get the benefit of the calls late either. On their final drive, they fought into position but did not get a spot on a contested pass in the end zone, and Hurts's last shot failed to find a receiver. The officiating, the penalties, and the lack of certain calls at critical moments will be dissected, replayed, and debated on every highlight loop. But at the end of the day, Denver executed the plays they needed when the margin of error was smallest. This is a loss that will sting for the Eagles for a lot of reasons. It ends an unbeaten run and raises more questions about situational execution and discipline. When you get flagged at key junctures, when a potential turnover or two doesn't go your way, it amplifies any underlying issues that might have been masked by the unbeaten record. Nick Sirianni's team still has elite playmakers and a top-tier defense on paper, but Sunday exposed how quickly a game can tilt when the little things aren't handled. For Sean Payton and the Broncos, this is a huge wind in the sails. Nix, only a rookie earlier in the season, settled in and orchestrated the comeback with poise. The offense showed the ability to go on long drives when necessary. The defense found ways to get off the field, and the coaching staff made bold, correct calls at the most uncomfortable moments. That goes beyond a feel-good win. It's a blueprint for how Denver can win games in tight spots all season long. What should we watch next? For the Eagles, it's discipline and situational awareness. Can they avoid the penalties that turned potentially game-winning drives into nothing? Can Hurts and the receivers maintain explosiveness late in games without self-inflicted setbacks? For the Broncos, the story is whether they can string together late-game syrup like this into a consistent edge, and whether Peyton's willingness to bet on the hair trigger moment becomes a defining part of Denver's identity. Coaches will point to specific plays, analysts will argue over the officiating, and fans will replay every fourth-quarter sequence until the next game arrives. But this is what makes football compelling. A single decision, go for two, can reshape an entire day. Sunday was a reminder that no record is safe, that veteran teams can be toppled by opportunistic opponents, and that the margins between triumph and disappointment are tiny, agonizingly tiny, when the final minutes arrive. The Eagles walk away with their first loss, but not a fatal one. The season is long, and good teams learn faster than others. The Broncos walk back to the locker room elevated, not by the scoreboard alone, but by the conviction that they can close when it matters. Both teams will be better for this test. One, because it exposed areas to fix. The other, because it confirmed the value of aggressive, confident decision-making in the fourth quarter. Philadelphia. The Philadelphia Eagles saw a 14-point fourth-quarter lead vanish Sunday in a stunning collapse that handed the Denver Broncos a 21-17 upset at Lincoln Financial Field. And it all hinged on one bold decision by Broncos head coach Sean Payton. With 7:36 left in the game and Denver trailing by one score, Payton called for an aggressive two-point conversion after the Broncos' second fourth-quarter touchdown. Quarterback Bo Nix rolled right and hit former Oregon teammate Troy Franklin in the back of the end zone, and the successful conversion flipped the scoreboard to 18-17, a moment that silenced the Philly crowd and altered the complexion of the final 7 minutes. It was the culmination of a furious Denver comeback. The Broncos erased a 17-3 fourth-quarter deficit behind methodical drives and a defense that tightened when the game mattered most. Nix, who settled into the contest after a shaky start, also delivered a key 34-yard third-down strike to Courtland Sutton on the go-ahead drive, and later found Evan Engram for a touchdown that set the stage for the decisive two-point try. For the Eagles, Sunday began with promise. Jalen Hurts connected for a 52-yard strike to Devonta Smith in the first half that set up Dallas Goedert's early touchdown, and later opened the second half with a 47-yard touchdown to Saquon Barkley on a perfectly timed wheel route that shredded the Denver defense. Those big plays made it look for long stretches like the reigning Super Bowl champions would cruise to another victory. But momentum swung in the fourth quarter. A well-timed, simulated pressure by Broncos defensive coordinator Vance Joseph resulted in a third-down sack, and Denver's defense repeatedly came up with timely stops. Philadelphia's offense, which had looked explosive earlier, began to stall. Penalties proved costly at critical junctures. An illegal shift on Barkley wiped out what would have been a 30-yard catch and run to Smith late in the fourth, nullifying a drive that could have put the Eagles back in control. Controversy touched the finish too. On Denver's final ball control drive, the officiating faded further into the headlines. An intentional grounding flag on Nix was assessed, then overturned, and a late hit penalty on Eagles linebacker Zach Bond moved the Broncos into manageable field goal range. With 1:11 remaining, Denver settled for a 36-yard field goal that put them ahead 21-17. Philadelphia had one last chance. After forcing a punt, Hurts drove the Eagles toward the end zone, but came up short on a final pass into the paint. The play fell incomplete, and Denver celebrated an improbable comeback. The loss is a seismic one for the Eagles, who entered the day unbeaten and riding a 20-1 run over their previous